Hello, my name is Taya Graham, and welcome to the Police Accountability Report. As I will say every time, this show is about holding police accountable. And sometimes that means following up on a story more than once, which is exactly what we're going to do today. That's because one of our recent guests, Blind Justice, has been arrested again. And to give us a breaking news update on what happened and why, we will be joined by Blind Justice. But before we do that, I want to remind you that if you have evidence of police misconduct, please share it with us. We might be able to investigate. Please email us privately at par@therealnews.com. Of course, you can contact me directly at Taya's Baltimore on Facebook or Twitter. Please like, share, and comment. Now, back to the matter at hand. When we first met Blind Justice here on the Police Accountability Report last year, he was holding authorities accountable in Aberdeen, Washington, after police shot a homeless man. They said the man had a gun, but the video of the shooting you are now seeing raises troubling questions about that assertion. And since that show, we have continued to keep in touch with him. And he, like many others across the country, seeks to hold government institutions accountable. Now, for those who don't know him, Blind Justice is a First Amendment activist, some might call him an auditor, who surveys government facilities for issues like the Americans with Disability Act compliance. A few weeks ago, we interviewed him after he was arrested in Guilford, North Carolina. Police threw Blind Justice to the ground while he was monitoring the ADA compliance of buildings there. Let's watch.
Sir, are you going to leave right now or not?
Whoa. I don't know who you are. Stop. This is assault and battery. Stop.
Yes, sir,
Help. Somebody help me. Stop.
During the arrest, he sustained injuries, bruising, and wrist fractures, which led to his hospitalization with the concern that he had bleeding on his brain. But over the weekend, we learned that Blind Justice was arrested again, this time in Madison, North Carolina. The arrest occurred when Blind Justice and his wife, Nina, were sitting in a church parking lot. Police approached, claiming the couple was trespassing. After a short discussion, the officer initiated an arrest.
Is a crime being committed?
Do you want to keep this window, yes or no? Because I'm about to bust it out if you don't start giving me some IDs.
Okay, we're recording this. No, hey, hold on.
Why
Can I
are
get a
you
supervisor?
being so violent? I need a supervisor.
Can you tell us the reason?
I'm afraid to
please don't smash.
I'm afraid to put my hand down. Listen, I'm afraid to put my hand down because I don't want you to say that I'm.
It's cold. Please don't smash the window.
Please don't smash my window. I don't want to reach
Please
down.
stop. Please stop. What do you need?
What do you want? Are you?
Can you help?
Us?
Can you stop?
Help me, please.
Please stop.
Now, I don't have laptop. This iPhone hasn't been back up in 47 weeks. Don't worry.
Okay, just do. Yeah. They're threatening violence.
I don't want to
So.
throw my stuff on the ground. I don't want to throw all my money on.
Please don't touch me. Please. Okay. I'm fine. Please don't touch me. I have PTSD. I have multiple brain injuries. I'm blind. Okay. Do you have a disability coordinator, please?
To get their side of the story, we're joined by Mike, also known as Blind Justice. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, Taya, Steven, thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. So if you don't mind, tell me exactly what you were doing in this parking lot. I think that you or your wife was simply playing a game, right?
Yeah, we enjoy playing PokemonGo, and I've got a little Pokeball that I can click a button and catch Pokemon. So that's one of the few games that I can enjoy, with a visual impairment, and it's something that we do together. So we were just having some alone time.
Well, that sounds like some pretty simple, clean, innocent fun. So why did the police officer come over and to your car, and why did he initiate the arrest?
Good questions. I don't know.
What did the officer say to you when he approached you? Did he make any comments? Did he ask you anything?
I think the initial thing he said was to roll down the window and to provide ID. And so we asked, who he was and what was the reason for the stop, or what crime he suspected us of committing. And from there, I think the video, says it all, because he starts banging on the window, threatening to smash the window. And we became concerned for our lives that this person may not be, an actual police officer. And if he is, then he's clearly unstable and a threat to us.
So what happened during your arrest? I think that the officer said that you were impeding an investigation. So did he ask you for your ID? Wasn't that the point where the arrest really began?
I'm not sure exactly where the arrest began. And I definitely want to challenge their unlawful activity and stand up for the Constitution and for the freedom of the people. So, I advised my wife to comply under duress and provide her ID, and she did. And then they demanded I give ID. I told them I didn't have one on me, and they physically removed us from the car after she rolled down the window. Even though they promised they wouldn't remove her from the car, they removed us from the car, put us both in handcuffs, and then he again demanded I give him identification. And they searched my pockets without consent. They were made entry into the car without consent, and he actually stole her car keys, which they held over the weekend.
What did they end up charging you with? What were the charges that they charged?
On scene, he was trying to say trespass, but he admitted with the several other officers there that when he initiated his lights, we were moving. The car was rolling out of the parking lot. And so she stopped because she saw the lights, and then he approached. But so we dispelled trespass because we were on our way out, and he was preventing us from leaving. So he didn't really try trespass much after that. So then he said, "Well, you're impeding investigation." And when I was trying to clarify investigation into what crime? You just clarified there was no crime. And then I asked him if I was obligated to answer his questions or if I had the right to remain silent, and they didn't want to answer those direct questions that disproved his theory for initiating the arrest. Next thing I know, that he's escorting me with his backup, Officer Michael. So this was Corporal Benfield was the initial attacker banging on the window, and the guy making the arrest, and his backup was Officer Michael with the Madison Police Department. They started to escort me to the front of our van to a cruiser and started patting me down more and checking my pockets and everything. And I think at that point they may have said something about this being an arrest. So I didn't know that they were trying to arrest me until it was way late in the game. I probably would have given them ID if I knew they were threatening arrest, under duress, because I don't want to be put in that situation.
Right. So let me just ask, do you think by any chance that this officer knew you or knew of your work as a First Amendment activist?
Yes, absolutely. So they confirmed as much in the police department in Madison. They said they knew me from YouTube, and the captain of the department knew me. They were aware of me. They said they knew where I lived. So all kinds of kind of intimidation tactics that they were using in the police department.
Something I don't think people really realize is how much financial hardship is involved in being pulled into the criminal justice system. Has this been a financial strain for you and your family? I mean, didn't you have to post bond?
Yeah. So I didn't have to post bond. I could have still, I could have been left there to try to survive. But because of them not giving me any kind of accommodations or modification under the ADA, even though I requested it at every step, on the scene, at the police department, at the magistrate, and then with the jailers, they all refused ADA, and then they stripped me naked and put me on suicide watch. And so they took away my glasses and my cane and everything I have to try to help prevent the exposure to the light, because I'm incredibly photophobic. It causes extreme pain and migraines. Yeah, so by the time I was able to communicate a little bit, and I asked to be able to call, this was probably, 20 hours. I don't know what the time was. It was maybe around 5 p.m. on Saturday. The day shift refused my request for a call. They said I had a chance last night or the night before. And then they said the night shift would give me that chance. The night shift was like 40 minutes out from shift change is what they said. So I went and laid back down and tried to cover my eyes. And during the shift change and the night shift, they eventually let me get a call around 6 p.m.
Okay, so I'm just going to make sure that I have clarity on this for our viewers. You're a veteran who suffers from a visual impairment. You were arrested, stripped, put into isolation, denied the tools that you need to help you move through the world as someone with an impairment, and then they also denied you a phone call. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes.
Now, this seems to me to be a pattern of retaliation. I mean, is that how you view this?
Yeah, absolutely. And I realize I didn't answer your question about financial burden, but yeah, we did pay the bond, a bondsman, to get me out because I was in fear that they were going to kill me. They put me on suicide watch and they were already torturing me. So the next step is for them to kill me and blame it on suicide. And so I finally got a hold of the missus, and and she rushed to try to pay whatever ransom she could to get me out. So yeah, it's definitely a financial burden.
Now, I'm going to ask you a question, which I don't mean to offend by, but I know there's going to be someone in our audience who asked this. Why didn't you just have your wife show the ID immediately?
Oh, for her to display hers?
Right. Or, you know, since you know that you possibly are going to be retaliated against the department, someone's going to ask, well, why didn't you have your ID ready? Or why didn't your wife show your ID? What would be your response to someone who asked a question like that?
Yeah, well, he clearly he didn't articulate any reasonable articulable suspicion. So we asked him multiple times for that, and until he does, like he's just demanding papers. You know, he's demanding her give up or waive her Fourth Amendment right to be secure in her papers and effects. And so it was my advisement to just wait and see if we can actually get him to articulate an actual crime that he suspects us of. Right. And by the time he kept denying that and was just continuing to escalate the threats, then eventually I was like, just okay, under duress, go ahead. We're gonna try to comply under duress because we're deathly afraid of these people.
So they searched your pockets and they took your wife's car keys. Does that mean that your wife, how did your wife get home? When you were taken away to jail, she had her car keys taken away. What happened next?
Yeah, I guess when they took because I have a backup set of keys on me, and so they took my keys, and I don't know, did they throw them in here? Where did you find them? Oh, somebody handed them to her, okay. My set of keys, but she wasn't able to find her keys. And I think that's one of the last parts of the video that she posted was of her asking whoever was still in the parking lot if they knew where her keys were. And she made follow-up phone calls with the police department, and they claimed they didn't have them.
So we did reach out to the Madison Police Department for comment. We were immediately shunted to their 911 call system as opposed to being given their automated service or being given access to their communications officer. I did call the police chief and the police captain. They said, someone there said they're going to get back to me. So we're going to wait and see if they're going to provide us with comment on their arrest of Blind Justice. The arrest of Blind Justice for a second time in as many weeks brings up an interesting point about policing that rarely gets adequate scrutiny. Why does this country have so many police officers to begin with? Why has law enforcement in this country expanded to a $100 billion a year industry, according to some estimates? Take Madison, where Blind Justice was arrested. According to the town's website, the police department has 18 positions, including slots for a canine unit, investigations, and animal control. This is for a town of roughly 2,200 people, according to the census. Now, if that sounds like a lot of cops, it might be, at least if you take into account how much crime occurs there. According to several crime data websites we reviewed, which we're now showing on the screen, there were a total of 61 total crimes reported in Madison in 2019. There were no rapes, murders, or carjackings reported during the same time period. In fact, of the 61 crimes recorded, only 4 were violent. The rest were property-related. Just from a numbers perspective, it's a total that conjures an odd calculus. 61 crimes, 18 police employees, or roughly 3 per person. What am I missing? Perhaps these numbers speak to something critical to understanding American policing that is, again, often overlooked. How much policing do we really need? And what is the cost benefit of having a town with a proportionately large police department, but little, if any, crime? Just speaking from my experience here in Baltimore, I can assure you it's a critical question worth asking. Here in our city, we have one of the highest proportions of cops to population in the country. According to the website governing.com and based on the uniform crime reporting by the FBI, Baltimore was one of the most heavily policed cities in the country. Conversely, we are also consistently one of the most dangerous, notching one of the highest murder rates per capita last year with 348 homicides in 2019. But if you look at that same list, you see something interesting. Right at the top is New York City's largest police department per capita in the country. But unlike Baltimore, New York consistently reports one of the lowest murder rates of big cities across the country. The point I'm making here is something worth considering when we discuss American policing. The mainstream media and politicians are constantly equating more police with safety. That is, more cops on the streets means safer streets. Let's remember, it was President Bill Clinton, a Democrat, in the 1990s who vowed to put 100,000 cops into communities as a measure of his commitment to keeping people safe. And it was here in Baltimore where failed presidential candidate and Democrat, former Mayor Martin O'Malley, arrested 100,000 people a year under a brutal zero-tolerance program that the Justice Department determined was unconstitutional and racist. Let me say this again. 100,000 people arrested a year in a city of roughly 630,000 people. What all these facts elicit is a question that must be asked now and always, a query that goes to the heart of perhaps why the bizarre arrests we encounter on the show continue to occur. How much policing do we actually need? And what are the trade-offs and pitfalls of flooding our cities and towns with cops? At least here in Baltimore, we've answered part of that question. Crime has never been worse, and yet the police budget continues to climb. Over the past decade, our police budget has continued to grow while classrooms go without heat and air conditioning. It's a stark contrast in a city that perhaps provides a cautionary tale about cities who are considering committing larger and larger portions of their budget to law enforcement like Baltimore. Do more cops make us safer? Or, as we witness on the show, make our civic spaces less free? Does paying billions for law enforcement bring peace and prosperity? Or does the commitment of cops alter the very nature of our democracy? This is the question we have to ask and will continue to ask on this show, the Police Accountability Report. I want to thank my guest, Blind Justice, for joining us today and sharing his experience and fight for justice. Thank you for coming here today.
Hey, thanks, guys.
And I want to thank my colleague, Stephen Janis, for his invaluable reporting, writing, and editing on this piece. And I need to thank friend of the show, Noli D, who's helped made this episode possible. Thank you, Noli. I appreciate you. And I want you watching to know that if you have evidence of police misconduct or brutality, please share it with us and we might be able to investigate. Please reach out to us. You can email us tips privately at par@therealnews.com and share your evidence of police misconduct. You can also message us at Police Accountability Report on Facebook or Instagram, or at Eyes on Police on Twitter, or of course, message me directly at Tea's Baltimore on Twitter or Facebook. And please like and comment. You know I read your comments and appreciate them. I'm your host, Tea Graham. Please be safe out there.